And
Okay, we're live on Facebook now. Sorry to interrupt, but we're
No,
live
good.
and we're up and running. So if everybody wants to start, we can go ahead and do that.
well, the problem in starting is that some people will think we're starting it, so we'll have to
Good.
cut somebody off.
Yeah, we've got about 5 minutes left.
Maybe we could start, but not see if we can start without getting into the questions. Maybe
Well,
we
then I would like to respond to the thing about give it something better than giving cash to the homeless. One of the things that can be done quite effectively is for us ladies to take our old purses, we all collect them, and or you can just take any sort of a bag that you would use and put in it a few bars, a few toothpaste, toothbrushes, things that would help without just giving cash. And then also maybe a couple of dollars, but only a couple of dollars, so you're not encouraging them to go buy things that they shouldn't have, but hopefully doing some protein bars and anything that is stable and small enough to fit, but for sure some materials to help the ladies, and a comb, a brush, a toothbrush, and wipes for their hands, and hand sanitizer. You can put all those things into an old purse, and when somebody wants a handout, you can just keep it in your car because they're all stable and give it to them as you're going by.
Oh, we'll have to. I'll get back with you tomorrow, Naeem. Hopefully I'll be able to, and give you a response to what your questions were.
Okay, thank you.
Pardon me? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, thank you. There. All right. Well, let's begin. So I'm going to say welcome to A Conversation in Action. That's, by the way, the theme that we started. I think this is our fourth one now, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, it's our fourth one. So our theme this time is racism, voting rights, and poverty. And it's a really important theme. Racism has affected voting in the USA since it's founded. And it continues to affect people today. So it would really be great if somehow we could do a better job with voting and make sure that it's free and available to all people. And we have not been able to get that done. So that's part of what we'll be discussing today is racism, and does voting and racism have something together? Does racism and other effects that cause this thing that we always seem to not have racism free to everybody. So this evening, that's the dialogue. Yeah, and it's sponsored by Global Faith in Action and the Beyond Tolerance movement. So we're a diverse group of persons tonight. We've got 3, 4, 5, 7 of us. Well, 8 with me. 3, 6, 9, 3, 6, 7, 8. Something. Anyhow, so I think probably what we'll do is introduce each other, and why not let you do a little bit of introduction of yourselves. That'll say take a couple of minutes to say something about you. So let's begin with Sister Deborah Burks. And by the way, my problem for not putting the S behind the Dirk, but
not a problem.
I will not do that again. And but anyway, if you could, you know, you're a community organizer and an educator and so on. Tell us just a little bit about you.
Well, I grew up here in Kansas, and have been here and then gone for a lot of years, both to Colorado and to overseas in Jordan. And in being a native to Kansas, I tend to look at things through that net.
Okay, so you're a Muslim, right?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. How did? Could you give me one reason why it's important to be a Muslim for you?
Because it's to be a middle of the road or moderate person and a very humble person, but it's a very moderate religion, and that appeals to me.
Okay, thank you. Now let's go to our other Muslim panelist, who's Naim Balout, and he's the president of the Al Bayat Islamic Center in Wichita. Pronounce the a little better, the Islamic Center, what the name of it is, and then share a little bit about you.
Okay, my name is Naim Balout. I'm the president of the Ahlul Bayt Islamic Center. The word Ahlul Bayt is an Arabic word meaning the household of the Prophet, the progeny of the Prophet, Ahlul Bayt. Islamic Center, I've been here since 1984. I came from Lebanon, came to Wichita State University, graduated here, got married here, I'm still here, and currently work in Oklahoma City. I've been the president of this organization for the last 5 years. It's a brand new Islamic center on the west side of town. Our community is small, but it's growing. And for now, we haven't been having any meetings at all. We're being careful in conducting our meetings on Zoom, meeting in restaurants and stuff like that, but not on a larger scale.
Okay, thank you. Reverend Richard Kirkendall, you are the pastor of St. James Episcopal Church, also the president of the I've got that wrong. You are the president of the Greater Wichita Ministerial League, and you're the pastor of the Bethany Baptist Church, right? I said that wrong, yes. Okay, so my apologies, and can you say a little bit about what's important to you?
Well, I am Reverend C. Richard Kirkendall, pastor of the Bethany Missionary Baptist Church, and as you well said, president of the Greater Wichita Ministerial League. I'm a retired soldier, actually lived around the world, but I was born and raised right here in Wichita, Kansas, which is, I think, is the greatest place in the world to live. And I just believe, I'm a Baptist minister, and I just believe in the Lord God Almighty, and I believe in all mankind, that we all can find a way to connect and get along.
Yes, now, and we have Rabbi Michael Davis, let's see, I should be able to get that into my head. I've known you for so many years.
Would you like me to say it?
Yes.
No, you are the rabbi of Congregation Emmanuel, and we're so glad you're here with us tonight.
Thank you. Yes, that's me, Rabbi Davis. Congregation Emmanuel. Congregation Emmanuel is a Reformed congregation which is more progressive within the Jewish spectrum. And our congregation has been here since 1885. It's the oldest Jewish congregation in Kansas. One of the focuses, or foci, of Reform Judaism is social action, getting involved in the community and working for the betterment of the community. And I am trying to live up to that.
And then we want to introduce Serinda Moore. Serinda is the executive director of Alternative Gifts International. And I'm going to give you a gift and option if you would like to. You're welcome to come in and be a part of this conversation as much as you would like. You don't just have to be taking us from one place to the other, because we know you're the host of providing this. But if you want to do that, just jump in. We've only got one woman with us today. It'd be nice to have two women. And also, I think you might say something just about your faith tradition, because you have an interesting faith tradition that's different than any of us here.
I do, yeah. Well, I grew up in a Sikh household and married a Christian. So it's a balance for me as far as, I've seen alignments between the two faiths myself. And I want to say, a lot of people ask me, are you Christian? Are you, because I've been to churches, I've also been to mosques, I've been to pretty much every house of worship. And I want to say, I feel comfortable wherever I visited. I feel welcomed. And so growing up in a Sikh family and grew up in Northern England and in a row of homes, and we had a very diverse community. We had a Catholic family, we had a Buddhist family, a Sikh family, which was our family, a Muslim family, and then a Church of England worshippers. So we were all living on a terrace row of homes in England, Northern England, and we were neighbors. We took care of each other. We were like family. And so for me, thinking back to that time, it was really kind of a stepping stone to where I am today, I believe. I think, when God sets you on a path to go somewhere in life, that path is set, a long time ago. And I think that was part of it. So again, when people ask me what faith tradition do you, practice, I've had people ask me, what are you going to raise your son? Is he going to be Christian? Is he going to be Sikh? I said, well, really a little bit of both. There is so much beauty in Sikhism that aligns with Christianity. And, my primary focus is to raise a good human being first and foremost, and then everything else follows. So that's my faith tradition, is I pull from both Christianity and Sikhism.
Well, what a great panel we've got tonight, and I'm welcoming all the people that are listening to us, that they can have this nice idea and understanding also as to who we are, and yet we all love each other and care for each other and appreciate each other, because this is an interfaith group.
Sam, you forgot Bill Van.
What about Bill?
Yeah, Bill.
Yeah, Bill.
Oh, yeah.
Bill.
Oh my goodness, Bill. I'm not doing very well tonight.
He was
Bill,
quiet.
Bill Van. He's the pastor of the Christian Center. It's called IASIS, the IASIS Christian Center. Tell us a little bit about you.
My name is Pastor Bill Van. I've been in Wichita 100% of my life. Born and raised right here. I'm a fifth generation pastor. So our family on my mom's side has a history of pastoring all the way back as far as I can remember, back as far as she can remember. I could kind of consider myself a agent of change, but I'm not a person who's going to be out trying to change policies and all that. I really believe that effective change for me is belly to belly, face to face. So I like being right in the community, talking to people, and helping to invoke change from the inside out. That's the number one thing I really want to do is affect and see positive change in individuals, so that no matter if they live in an impoverished community or in a $1 million mansion, their mindset changes, how they treat people and think about people.
Thank you. Now, when I was about 13, when my mother was about 13 years of age, she had this wonderful thing happen in that women were given the right to vote. And so I thought all throughout my early days that all women were voting. But I have found out more recently, and the past 30, 40 years or so, that that's not the truth. She was able to vote way back then, but it didn't mean all women were going to be able to vote. So that's hopefully we can integrate that somewhat in our conversation as well this evening. So we're going to start with a question to Reverend Kirkendall. Um, why is voting and participating in the democratic process important?
Let me start off by saying good evening to everyone. And can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you
Everyone
fine.
hear me? Good. I believe voting is a fundamental right of every United States citizen. Every adult is given the right to vote, irrespective of their race, class, occupation, their gender. As long as you're an American citizen, you should be allowed to participate fairly, I must say, fairly in the democratic process of being able to help choose leaders and change policies in the United States. However, I do have to look at it from the perspective of a Black man because that hasn't always been the case for our race. We've been challenged on every end when it comes down to voting. In the early days, even up to now, we can point out discriminatory factors in voting, whether it's polls opening late and closing early, whether polls are being moved out a distance where people can't get rides to get there. And during this COVID-19, where voting by mail, is going to be a big part of it. Mailboxes are being taken down in neighborhoods where minorities are living. So we've always been disenfranchised when it comes to voting. It's from the beginning where we had to take tests in order to vote, guess how many jelly beans was in a jar, or whether it's taking a quiz with 100 questions that couldn't be answered. It's always been a process to try to disenfranchise us. But the good thing about America, it states that every American, regardless of their race, their gender, their occupation, their economic status, has a right to vote. And I believe that we ought to all go out because people have died so we can have this right to vote. We ought to all go out on November the 3rd and vote our conscience, regardless whether we're Republican, Democrat, Independent, go out and vote our conscience because this is what makes America better than any other nation in the world, that we have a right to exercise our vote. Sometimes it's more complicated than we realize for different races. But however, it's still a right for everyone.
Anybody want to add to that?
We living in a society where we can vote, where everyone has a voice. A lot of times it feels like those who are privileged, those who have money, those who have connections have more power than others. And because reality is reality, that is often the case. However, to be able to be a part of a society where, as Reverend Kirkendall says, regardless of your background, regardless of your tradition, regardless of your beliefs, you have a say. A small one because we are millions of people, but a say in our society. And I like to tell people that if you are progressive, you can go and vote on November 3rd. If you're more traditional or reactionary, go vote on November 4th.
Oh,
Hopefully we're not listening to the second part of it. We're gonna go vote before November 3rd.
I'm kidding.
I know, I'm kidding. I think it's very important. I mean, for people who came from different countries, this country, to get the opportunity to vote, to have your voice heard. Even if your party doesn't win, your person doesn't win, at least get you that feeling that you did have a say, you did present something, you did believe in an agenda, and you went to vote for it. Especially this time this year, there's a lot at stake here. There's a lot in the balance. It's not on the ballot. It's not just parties, Democrat versus Republican. There's a lot of issues need to be considered here. From my perspective, I think I encourage my community members, the one who are allowed to vote and are citizens to vote, is to go ahead and make the choice to vote. And if they ask me, what do you recommend? I sure will tell them, what do I recommend? But I do urge everybody to get out and vote. Don't say my vote doesn't count. Don't say it's not going to make a difference. Don't believe in that. Go ahead and put your vote in.
I guess my 2 cents would be, as everybody said, it is a fundamental right, but I'm incredibly a little bit disturbed and challenged by the fact of how difficult they're making it for me to exercise my fundamental right. It is almost absurd and ridiculous, the lengths that are being gone to prevent people from voting, from doing something that as an American citizen, whether by birth, by going through the process, you have a legal right to do. And I think that we really need to challenge any and all powers to be on the fact that people have a right to vote, grant them that right, and give them the access and the ability to vote. I mean, some of the things we're seeing now, how can you in good consciousness applaud or be okay with it? I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous. And everybody knows it's not right. Everybody knows it's not fair. The dilemma is people don't have the courage to stand up and say something about it. And we've got to get to that point, because voting is being denied to millions of people simply to try and favor one party or the other, when we ought to all be able to go to the polls on the 3rd and vote our consciousness, whatever that is. And to try and block somebody from that is un-American.
Can I add just a second more to remind people that it, as Naeem said, it's not just Democrat, Republican presidential race. All of the lower part, the lower races are just as important. We learned that back in the 1980s. We have to vote for our local people as well.
So this next question fits in nicely, but it calls for more from us. Sister Deborah Dirks, well, in what way should the voting process and voting rights be improved so that elections are truly democratic and equally accessible for all? We haven't discussed too much what being a democratic country means.
Well, we haven't, but I'd like to take this in a little bit different direction, in that looking at this and looking at it from the perspective of what an activist or a leader in the community can do to help people this year with the COVID situation going on and with disappearing mailboxes, etc. And there were two things that I found somewhat surprising but helpful. One was, we have to educate our voters in poor communities, in racially particular communities. A lot of the votes aren't counting because they're filling out the ballot by circling the name instead of checking the box. If you do that, your vote isn't counted. So we need to educate our people on how to vote. In particular, this is something that immigrants can have a problem with, especially if their English isn't very particular on pronouns. Because when you read the directions, it tells you how to vote, but it isn't very clear. So we need to either get out flyers or put something on our Zoom programs that have a ballot and, you know, Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck, but you have to check the one you're voting for, just to educate people so that our votes do count. The second thing is that we as organizers, as activists, we need to get out there and help our people get their votes to the polling place. You can go pick up your neighbor's votes. You have to fill out Section 2 on the outside of the envelope. You are prohibited from telling them how to vote, in other words, for which candidates, but you can just pick up their vote and take it to the polling place. This you are allowed to do, and it'll keep some of the votes out of the mail system. So it helps the mail system and helps us. So these are two things that I saw as doable for our, within Wichita, especially as I was reading that Wichita has had some sorting machines removed. And as I look at that, I look at how we can long-term, not meaning just this year, how can we help not have this, not to have the problems we're having now again? And in that, it is hard, because immediately I say, well, we can't elect another president like this. But somehow we have to get beyond the media and get people to really talk and think, to avoid doing this over and over again. Because, you know, even if you just look, you see where, you know, we have a Democrat for a couple of years, and then we have, or for a couple of terms, and then we have a Republican for a couple of terms, and you see things flipping back and forth. And of course, we need to work on the lower ballot, because that is essential to getting laws changed. Presidents have a lot of say-so, and they have the bully pulpit, but they can't make the laws. They are not allowed to. I guess maybe we'll find out whether that is a rule that stays, but they are not allowed to make the laws. So the lower ballot, both looking in terms of the House of Representatives and the Senate, and in looking at both local and state things, that has to also be dealt with, or the laws and the appointments that go on from the state level and from the federal level just get totally out of control.
Any other thoughts here?
I got one thought here. When I came to this country, I figured out that they have the election, which is a great way to vote. Is the way they position the day of the election was on a work day on Tuesday. I know it has some historical event to it, but most of the world, as you know, the day of the election is either a Sunday or a holiday or a paid off day, which means it allows everybody to vote. By only promoting one day, a work day, you're only somehow segregating who can vote, where they can vote. It's very important. I think something has to change in the law to have maybe voting on Sunday instead of Tuesday, or have the day to be off day so everybody can come and vote, not have just who have the ability to get off work and go vote and come back to work. That's my 2 cents about it.
Do you think there might be some reason behind still having it that way, whereas people of poverty or people who are, that have a job that they cannot get away from, they don't want to vote? Or is it just?
I think it's, yeah, I mean, I went to Lebanon one time and before I became a citizen and voted in Lebanon, and it was like a national holiday.
Right.
It's on Sunday, nobody is working except for the voting people. Everybody gets out, you get the buses, you get the vans, everybody gets their grandparents, their parents, they drive to the polling station, you vote, you get out. It's like a holiday thing. Now you have to rush to get in, spend a couple hours online to lose your work sometimes, so you may not vote. People cannot vote by mail or absentee ballot. They have to waste a day of work or half a day of work, and poor people cannot afford that.
We could easily keep it the day that it says in the Constitution, but make it a day off,
Sure.
Exactly.
A national
a
holiday.
mandatory day off to vote, as it happens, as you mentioned, in several other countries.
Okay, the next question, I think, could also help us think a little bit more about why some people have more difficult to vote than others as well. But this is to Dr. William Van. In most cities, the rich, the poor, the middle class live in separate areas. There are stark differences in the structure and appearance of each community. Why is that the case, and what can be done about it? And we could also connect that to voting as well, and why it might make more difficulty for some to vote in some areas than others. So go ahead.
Well, I think from a voting standpoint, I'll deal with that first. I mean, just if you've got a community that has a large population of people and one voting station with 2 voting booths in it, that's going to be challenging automatically, because it's not going to stay open that long and the lines are going to be outrageous. And it's just going to be a challenge for people. I mean, you have to really want to vote to be able to go through all of the issues that you might incur trying to vote. So I think that's one thing that hampers or hinders voting. And then the other side of it is that people have to really understand, I think it's been stated before, that their vote is relevant and it does count. I still encounter people who will say, I'm not voting because my vote doesn't count. It doesn't mean anything. Or I'm not voting because I'm not giving the government all of my information. And I want to say, knucklehead, you're on a cell phone. You don't think they got all your information already? Are you kidding me? You're on Facebook, you're on Google, you're on everything, and you don't want to give them your zip code? Are you serious? Think about what you're saying. So it's a mindset that has to be changed. But I think even when we go into further of the differences in appearance and structure in these communities, I really pondered that question a little bit, because I thought about structure and appearance as more than just physical buildings, but how does a person think? And I think that's really where we've got to get to. I know there's a scripture, Proverbs 23:7, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Now, I'm going to take it totally out of context. I'm going to tell you that up front. We're taking it out of context. But I want to take it from the perspective of how you think about yourself. And I think that how you think about yourself, how you consider yourself, really is a big indicator of how you will live your life and how your children will live their life. And so the first thing we have to do is we have to change the mindset of people, of how they think about themselves, because you could be raised in a poverty-stricken environment but not have a poverty mindset. And I think that is absolutely critical. The other thing is, we can't allow the opinion of the media to how can I formulate how we think about other communities. Because what happens is, if say the community where my church is off 11th in Minnesota, if you were just to listen to what the media says, you'd be challenged to go into that community. But if you would ever just walk down those streets, yeah, the houses are not, 3,000 square foot. They might be 800, 900 square foot, but the yards are manicured. They're well kept up, which means whoever lives there has pride in that community and in that house. But if you never go and visit, you'll make the assumption of whatever the media says. And the way I challenge that, I will not take a meeting if you won't come to my office. I'm not going to walk with them. I'm not going to know. You're going to come into the community and see it for yourself. I refuse to take a meeting. I won't go. So that's one of the ways I try and combat that. And I thought about even structure, and I looked it up just to Google it right quick, and it talked about parts or systems of a whole and arranged or organized. But I think that it's really the structure of how people think. And if we can change how people think, then we can begin to change the dynamics of those type of communities. And just because it's different in structure and appearance doesn't mean that anyone is better than what the other person is. If you understand what I'm saying, it just means that this happens to be my place of abode for right now, but that doesn't mean that anybody is better. And people have a tendency to isolate themselves within the community that they want to be a part of. And so what happens is communities that are financially challenged, in my opinion, are often raped of every good thing in there. And so if you take everything out of that community, how can the community become any better? If all the resources are taken out, how does the community become better when everything that was a benefit to community has been removed? And so what we have to do is be willing to reinvest in those type of communities. And when you reinvesting costs you. It's not a cheap thing to do. In my community where my church is, we haven't had somebody break in our church for over 30 years, but every year our insurance either goes up or has been canceled because the big block insurance agencies just look at the 67214 zip code and make a blanket statement about it, and we suffer because of it. That's just somebody generalizing a community based on whatever statistics without ever visiting it. And so what are the differences and what can be done? We have to invest back in it. And also, I think that there has to be models in the community. The only way I think a person really changes is they have to see a model of what they can be. And the model has got to look enough like them that they can see themselves through that model. If I'm going to be a better model to a young African-American man than somebody who is not African-American, because that young man can see himself through me. And I think, people might be offended by that, but it's just the truth. And so we have to leave models in that community. Somebody's got to choose to stay on purpose and know that staying on purpose costs you. But it's worth the investment when you see lives changed and individuals who were economically challenged now seeing themselves in a different perspective and seeing what they can become instead of living in what they are. I could go on a lot further, but I think that's enough.
I'll come back on in if you got some more thoughts, but someone else.
What Pastor Van said about zip code really hit me, that people who live in different zip codes will vote differently and think differently. And there are certain folks for whom the number one issue in any campaign is how much taxes do I have to pay? How do we reduce the taxes on my business? How do I reduce the interference in how I run my business? Other zip codes, it's how do I get help for someone who needs to get in the hospital or get some health care. People are concerned based on where they live. And I think that, I don't know that there's an answer there, or even that there's a question, but something that Pastor Van said about different zip codes, people think differently, and something we should be aware of.
I think that I'll add to that. I think that people like to live, I said earlier, in proximity of people with their same values. Let's be honest, their same belief systems and their same color code, if we just want to be honest about things. And so all of those play a factor into what shapes that community. But I think as believers, whatever your belief system is, it is our responsibility not to abandon those kinds of communities, but to reinvest in those kinds of communities and see what our investment dollars can really do. And when I say dollars, I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about thought, the way you think, your thought process, your ideologies, all of those things that can make a positive change in someone's life.
this might be an opportunity also for some of you to respond to something that Global Faith in Action is thinking of doing, and see if it would be at all help in getting people from different areas to really build relationships and invite them to, and so on. We've been doing dialogue for a million dialogues in people's homes, but we can't do it in homes anymore. We can't get a bunch of people in this home and this home right now because of, so we're thinking about doing it differently. This might be a more exciting way, and a way that would even work better. And we may want to continue to do it this way by using Zoom and so on. But we'd look like 3 different households from 3 different areas of the city that would have a laptop or something in there, and they would share what they're doing. It'd be around a meal. Each family would be 3 families. Now we can have many of them going on, so we could have 15, 20, 30, 40 families, but each of them would be a group of 3. And we would carefully put the questions together that also that they would respond to each one of these families in of the 3 each places. And we wouldn't be sharing what they're saying to the whole world, but we would get ideas from them where we could begin to help people to understand what it takes to build relationships. Because that's at the center. The way we look at it is that we've got to build relationships where we understand each other. Then we want to be with each other. When they become friends, we don't want to leave them. We want to be a part of them. And so we're looking at, during this time with this virus and so on going on, trying our dinner dialogues, but trying them to have the families in their own homes, but 3 families would be sharing together over their meal. What do you think? Would it help? Go ahead.
I think it's a good idea. I think it even plays better, of course, when you can actually meet. I don't know if can you hear me?
Yes.
I think it actually plays better when you can meet publicly, but even through Zoom would be okay. I think that we'd have to make sure there's some fundamental guidelines. And I think one of the critical things is that this is a dialogue. Nobody is better than anybody else. Because if we're in conversation and my mindset says that I'm better than you, then I'll never truly value what you're saying, because I'll always look at you as an inferior person. And so I think that it would be one of the greatest things we could do would be to carefully blend or fit those families together, so that, let me make it real plain, so that we don't have a white family who the husband is a doctor having a dialogue with an African-American family who the father is a mechanic, because that subconscious mindset is going to be, I am here and you are here. So if we're going to do those kind of dialogues, let's have an African-American doctor with a white African-American, with a white doctor, and then let them have conversation. Because if you don't equal that playing field, somebody's always going to subconsciously feel superior, and somebody's going to feel inferior. And even though we have great conversation, we'll never build relationship, my opinion.
Thank you for that. Yes.
Fair enough. Yep.
Yeah, I have a slightly different view of this, that if we have someone who is of privilege and someone who is not of privilege, getting into the kind of dialogues that we like to have at these dinner dialogues, that's when this doctor, as you mentioned, can see, oh my gosh, these people are like me. They begin to see, so that not only do we have a diversity of religion, a diversity of race, but also a diversity of wealth as well. So that, for instance, someone from one zip code having a dialogue with someone from another zip code will see that all this time I avoided this, and now I see that they're like me. They have the same concerns as I do.
One of the things that is very, very important if you are going to get people to drop their prejudices and whether they are social or racial or heritage or what, but to get people to drop their prejudices, each person needs to get to know someone who is from that group. So if your diversity isn't on all levels, you don't have the opportunity to get to know people on another level. And it's not that someone is better than, but let's face it, if you put a Christian and a Muslim together, they're both going to learn things about the other's religion. And if you put the mechanic and the doctor together, they are both going to learn things about each other that will make them value the other person more and rethink their own prejudices. And I've watched this happen many, many times. It's so important that we get to know each other and reach out to each other and form relationships with people who aren't the same as us.
And that's always the goal. I think one thing we should make sure, I mean, certainly all the dinner dialogues, we have ground rules about respect and all that. But if we're doing this by Zoom, I think we'd have to go the extra mile and make sure that people understand privacy, that what we say on Zoom is going to be just as private as if we were sitting in the room together.
Yes, that is going to be done.
I think it's also important that we encourage those people that we bring together to continue that relationship after the dinner, so that those families that you bring together, they continue to get to know each other and learn about each other after that one situation.
I think there's a question from the community. The person has written the question, and I'm going to ask Naeem to respond to this, and it kind of fits probably into where we are right now. The question is, Wichita continues to become more religiously diverse. I drive by a mosque every day going to work. What are your religious beliefs regarding poverty, and would Islamic teaching encourage all USA citizens to, including Muslims, to vote?
Okay.
Now it's a question about a religion they know nothing about. And they're just wondering what's going on in that place that they drive by all the time.
True, that's true.
And what,
I think Pastor Van and Rabbi Michael addressed this about different zip codes. So you look at the zip codes, okay, this zip code is defined as being, this is a poor neighborhood, this zip code is defined as being a rich neighborhood. Poverty doesn't have a face, doesn't have a race, doesn't have a religion to it. You could be of any race, of any religion, you can have poverty in your community. How do we deal with poverty from an Islamic perspective? It's probably common to every other faith. Nothing is different about it. God entrusted us with a lot of blessings and a lot of giving that He gave us. The blessing that He gave us is not yours to keep, it's yours to share. That poor guy that you're looking at, or poverty that you're looking at, this is God's way of giving you a ticket to His paradise through that poor man by giving him his share. The poor man at the end of the day will stand up inside of God and say, oh God, you gave this man so much, or you gave this community so much. It's his responsibility to share his wealth with the less fortunate. It's his responsibility to share what God gave him with the poor people. It's not his, it's God that's given him, and he has to share it. It's our responsibility as Muslims and as a human being to take care of our neighbors, take care of our poor community, reach out to them, especially in this day and age. Historically speaking, from the Prophet's time and before Prophet Muhammad's time, it's all the same thing. How to take care of the poor in your community, how to take care of the less fortunate in your community. It's one thing, I'll give you this. When Imam Ali, commander of the faithful, was in his city, he was walking into the market and he saw somebody there who is begging, a beggar. He asked his followers, why is he begging for? What brought him to begging? He goes, well, he's an old man now. He worked hard at the beginning of his life and now he doesn't have anything left for him. He said, shame on you. This is a man in your community, a man in your city, and he gave his youth and he worked for the city, and now he has nothing left, and you let him go out and beg for money so he can survive. Take him to the house of finance, provide for his well-being, his family well-being, until his demise or until his time passes by. We can't live in our life now and have so much and have our neighbors poor. Or how neighbor doesn't have meal at the table at dinner time. It's forbidden for us to sleep at night time. The Prophet teaches that it's forbidden for you to sleep at night time when your neighbor is hungry. You have to reach out to them. If you know they are poor in your community, it's a responsibility upon you. It's God's ordering you to behave and go take care of your poor in your community. Especially in these days now. We have so much blessing and abundance of food everywhere. There's no need for anybody to go hungry. No need to anybody to have no home or no food or no shelter or no school supplies or any of this stuff. We're all God the blessing. We're all blessed with plenty of things. If you can feed yourself, I'm sure you can feed another person in your community. That's what I believe in. As far as what does a Muslim believe in, as far as voting, it is a must, an obligation upon a Muslim to vote, to present his vote. Because God says in his holy book, hold them, they are responsible. If you don't speak, if you do not raise your voice, if you do not raise your concern, you and the oppressor, you and the unjustified, you'll be in the same position, in the same place. God will both hold you responsible. So he's asking us to act, to raise a voice, to raise our concern. So we do have to vote. We do encourage our community to vote for the right choice, to look at the agenda, at the big picture and at the small picture. As the city council, at the mayor level, the Congress, the state, the presidency, or the agenda. Look forward what best work for your community and vote for it, because you're going to be held responsible for your vote and for not voting.
Thank you. And I maybe put you on the spot, but I really appreciate you doing that. Now we're going to go to another question that is the fourth question that we put together. And I hope all of you can kind of respond to it, because this is, I think, a really important question for us to it can get us into a lot of things. Let me just share the question here. When historians paint a picture of the 21st century, what do you hope they will say? That all people were treated equally? That there were peaceful relationships throughout the world? You are welcome to elaborate as much as you would like and share thoughts on how we can get there together. Rabbi, if you would begin.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I mean, certainly all of those things. I mean, when historians in the future are writing the history of the 21st century from the colony on Mars or wherever it is, I would hope for all these things. However, the 21st century began, the biggest news story in the world was 9/11. And so, number one, we see hatred being the beginning of this century. And people and it elicited, it caused more hatred in the world. However, what I saw instead was how people responded against the hatred. That is, when when Muslims in the United States were attacked for being Muslim, or even non-Muslims who may look like a Muslim were attacked because of 9/11, I saw people respond to that and say that is not right. So taking that as my cue for the 21st century, what I would hope is that future historians would say that yes, problems continued. Yes, hatred exists. Yes, there was poverty and war. However, more and more throughout the century, and look, we're what? We're a fifth of the way through the century. More and more throughout the century, we learned to fight that. We learned to stand up to oppression, to stand up to hatred, to fight against war, to raise awareness about systemic racism and anti-Semitism and anti-foreign feelings. And more people stood up on that side and said, we will not put up with that. So that at the end of the century, we recognize that hatred is a part of the human way, but more people are standing up to fight against it.
Whatever you wish, whatever you'd like to believe that think that could be happening by the end of this century, share it.
Ray Bradbury wrote a story, it's many years ago I read, that had people trying to look back and figure out about the 20th century and what it really was, and they found a very old film, and they decided that this is what the 20th century was. It was a Walt Disney cartoon. And I'm hoping that they will not think that we are a Walt Disney cartoon, but rather that we managed over time to enlighten enough people to go forward positively and erase some of the wrongs that have been done in former centuries, to where we all at least start on an even level.
Brenda, did you want to say something, Smina? Okay. Someone else want to share?
I just really believe that when the history is recorded, that we just be truthful about it. We tell it like it is. We don't try to see it through rose-colored glasses and paint a picture to make the kids think that we were just overcomers and everybody got along singing Kumbaya. Just tell the truth about history. Not like it was with the history of the past, where we try to paint some of the American great as the men of America, and when we really do the history on it, there was everything but that. Just tell the truth about what really happened during this time period. Not try to put icing on it and make it look good.
I believe, go ahead.
Well, I think that in order to do that, then it says when historians paint a picture of the 21st century, what they will say. I think the critical thing is we need to paint an accurate picture of history. We need a myriad of interpretations. In other words, it can't just, that's what's the problem with the historical history that we have right now. It was written from one perspective. And if I'm writing it, I write it from the skew of my vantage point, which means I skew things, not maybe even on purpose, but just from my perspective. But if you're going to write history, history should be recorded. But that's why you got Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They recorded the same events, but you see different vantage points from their perspective. And I think history has to be written not just from one perspective, but from a myriad of perspectives, so we can really grasp what actually happened.
I want to second that motion too, because they say history is written by the victor. I think history should be written by both parties. You have to see it from both angles. the victor can write the story, and they can beautify it, and they can sensualize it and do everything they want to it. By the time you get to it, you say, wow, we did discover this continent here. It was barren. There was nothing in this here. There was just some couple guys and some high mountains over there. That you look at it from a different angle, these people had history. They had civilization.
Absolutely.
So we do have to consider that when we look into the history, that make sure who's writing this history, and can we critique it and be fair about it. I mean, be brave to say, let's go back and revisit history. Let's go back. It's okay. Let's go back and see it again one more time. That will help a lot.
Anyone else? One thing I certainly hope that they will be saying is that we saved this world and its environment. Because I think we've got a lot on our hands that we don't talk about a lot, but the environment is so important for this earth to still be here at that time. So I hope we have done the job and that we will have saved this earth.
It is.
Yeah, I vote that the Earth exists in 100 years too. Yes, I'm in favor of that.
I think it's true. I mean, this land or this earth was entrusted to us by God to take care of it. When we neglect it and we do damage it, we are responsible for it in the hereafter. We have to answer that question. What have you done in your time? And I hope we will be doing a good job and not come out saying we screwed things up. Send us back again for another round. No, you can't. This is the time to fix it now. This is the time to do it now. Do not say you're going to fix it when you pass away. You can't. Do what you can now. Follow the science, the true science, and fix it now. See what you can do now. Do not destroy what God entrusted you with.
And I have another thought. I've had the privilege of doing a lot of traveling, and all of them, almost all of the places I've traveled have been because of interfaith, or because I was finding out what another religion was like. And I've lived with some for a week or two. I've experienced, and I have found that there's a lot of good in them, and that they have a lot to teach, and that we can grow from each other. And I'm hoping so, that by the end of this century, we will not have lost who we are, but we have also found that we can grow by experiencing others. That's a relationship with others, that's experiencing others, and it makes our religion even stronger because of what we have learned that has worked for others as they are experiencing their God relationships. So that's a huge hope of mine.
And I hope that more people have that kind of curiosity that Sam Meiskens has, that we will want to go out and learn more about others rather than seeing them and just saying they're wrong and I'm right, but rather have that openness and curiosity and accepting that Sam Meiskens has to learn about someone and realize how much I can benefit from that.
I'm a United Methodist pastor, and I'm proud to be, and love preaching, and I have the life of Jesus means a lot to me, but I also know that there's the life of others that have taught me a lot as well, and so I think we all need to build that kind of a relationship. And I sure hope it will happen, because it's the only way I see that we won't have all those wars that we may be saying we're still going to have. I don't think we have to have them. I think there's a way we can learn to live where wars will be no longer.
Amen.
We do have a question from Facebook.
Oh.
from David Glover, and he's asking in relation to the Electoral College, is it neutral in the discussion of racism, voting rights, and poverty, or is it an advantage or disadvantage regarding the votes of certain groups of people?
You know, that's a, I mean, I don't know that any of us are really qualified to answer that. I speak for myself. My understanding is that the purpose of the Electoral College was so that less populous states would have more as much rights as more populous states. But how it functions in today's society, does it favor the wealthy? Does it favor the connected? Does it favor the populated? I don't know.
I think it obviously has to, just by the fact that the people who are in the Electoral College are normally people who are working their way up through one party or another. And so it is people who can afford to take time off from work, who can afford to do those things, to travel and this sort of thing to be part of that. And so that would mean, I think, that even if they are trying their best to be very fair, it would be natural that their concerns would be towards those of a more wealthy person rather than of a poorer person who can't afford to be there.
But we elect them, right? I mean, they are elected by us, and in many states, they are obligated to vote according to what we, the people, are saying. So it's not like the United States is going to say is going to vote for one person, and the Electoral College is going to say, you know what, we're going to vote for someone else instead.
Sure.
Some states, they are not obligated to vote the way of the people. Some states, it's split, that if the voting was 30-70, that the Electoral College vote also be 30-70. And many states, it is that whoever won the state, they are obligated to vote that way. So it's sort of, it's not the same across the board.
Right, but I don't, to say, I would hesitate to say that the Electoral College, by its very nature, favors, for instance, the wealthy because they can go travel. I think it might be more complicated than that. But again, I'm not the expert. I'm just my own sense.
Well, I'm not the expert either, but I've watched them be elected, and that's my observation.
Okay, I think maybe that's why we should go to a popular vote then. switch Electoral College. I never seen any other country have this system, but in the United States have this Electoral College system instead of popular vote. Let the people vote, let the people's voices be heard, count every vote. It doesn't matter what state, whatever you're at, count the popular vote. That's as simple as happens everywhere. You do it in your small community. You're in popular votes. Let it do it this way. So
I agree, because we have so much voting trickeration and shenanigans until I think really too it should be just a straight up popular vote, winner takes all.
yeah.
Sort of an electoral grammar school.
Yeah.
I think if I remember my history when we studied that, it was done because people didn't have all the ways of communicating. And so it had something to do with the voting and how they had to decide. And when you're a big country like this, they came up with this way to get to be fair, and to represent the votes of all the different people. But they couldn't communicate like we can today. I don't think there's any reason why we need it anymore today, because we communicate pretty well between each other wherever we are. So it's really not necessary. They did it for a necessary reason at that time, and it's never gone away.
Yeah. Okay. That's another day, another topic.
Yeah. Okay, it's our time where we just finished our hour. And thank you so much. If any of you have an idea for a theme that we could use for another time, sometime next month, we'll want to do this again, I hope, and have a couple of other people who will be a part of our panel as well. I'm trying to get a Native American Indian to be a part of it. And I think that would
That'd be nice.
add to us. I talked to a couple and they're helping me, so probably by the next time we'll have that. But that doesn't mean that we don't want you. I think you all are very exciting to have as a part of the panel, but I think we can add a couple other religious backgrounds also to this. And that's what I'm looking to do. So if any of you have any friends or so that you would like to say, yeah, that would be good to have on the panel, please let us know. And also what theme we decide upon. Anything else from anyone? Any suggestions?
No, thank you so very much for having us again. And we pray for Mother Dawn for a healthy recovery.
Well, thank you, all of you. And and thank you for everybody who's listening. We'd love
Thank
to
you, Surinder.
give us your comments.
Thank you, Surinder.
Well, yes, thank you. And thank you, Sam.
Everyone have a good evening.
You too, guys. You guys stay
You
safe.
too.
Yeah,
God
bye-bye.
bless.
God bless.